All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction, a crazy day in the Big 12. Hopefully you stayed up late last night. I'm pulling the sleep out of my eyes right now after that BYU game. We'll talk about each game quickly, but then we'll talk about the scenarios and who we think is probably going to the playoff, who is on just life support right now to try and get to the playoff, and what's going on in the Big 12. Listen, Colorado continues to roll. They dominated Utah in a 10 a.m. Eastern kick. We talked about that game specifically after the game. It was not necessarily good for the fans out there, but it was great for me to be able to put a video out quickly after that Colorado win in the middle of the afternoon here Eastern time. They keep their lead in the Big 12. They still just have the one conference loss. A couple of eliminations happened. West Virginia lost. They're eliminated. Kansas State lost. They're eliminated. And so we get down to really just 4 teams that can win or make the Big 12 championship. And we've got a major shakeup that we'll talk about here in just a moment. BYU obviously drops their game to Kansas. They now have their first conference loss. They're ahead of Colorado based on the tiebreaker. They're still in first place, but that doesn't matter so much. That who gets the home locker room, who gets the white jerseys or the black jerseys, right? Like that's not a huge deal at this point. But Iowa State keeps their hopes alive by beating Cincinnati. They still have the 2 losses. And all of a sudden, Arizona State, by beating Kansas State, a game that nobody really thought that they could go in and win, nobody outside of the Sun Devils and Coach Kenny Dillingham, they end up getting 8-2 overall. They still just have the 2 conference losses. But this thing is wide open. We're going to talk about that, but make sure if you're watching this, you do hit the subscribe button. I will continue to break this down week by week. We will certainly preview that BYU Arizona State game as it's one of the bigger games in the country this upcoming week. Don't tell Desmond Howard about how big that game is. He'll wonder why they're picking it next week on ESPN. This thing is wide open. BYU, they can clinch their spot in the Big 12 championship by beating Arizona State on Saturday and Colorado or Iowa State losing. Either one of those teams lose and BYU wins, they are in. Colorado, their path is very easy. They can clinch either by winning their next 2 games, which are going to be favorites in both of them. The Kansas game is going to be phenomenal this weekend. Or if they were only to win one of their 2 games, if BYU beats Arizona State and then Iowa State loses one game, then they get in. Obviously, some convoluted stuff there, right? Let me say it again. Colorado can either win their next 2 and they're in, or if they only win one, they need BYU to beat Arizona State, and they need Iowa State to lose 1 game. Now, Arizona State clinches by winning out. That's right. Arizona State goes to the Big 12 championship if they win both their games. If they beat BYU this weekend and Arizona in the rivalry game at the end of the year, they are in. Not sure we expected that coming into this weekend, but with enough craziness going on, with Arizona State winning yesterday, they control their own destiny. Now, Iowa State, they clinch by winning out, and Colorado and BYU both dropping 1 game. They get in on the tiebreaker if a 4-way tie happens at 7-2, which is pretty crazy. 4 teams very much alive, 3 teams that control their own destiny in this thing because of the Arizona State BYU matchup this weekend. Week 13, Cincinnati plays at Kansas State. That game not really relevant for the conference. Baylor at Houston, not really relevant for the conference. Texas Tech at Oklahoma State, again, not relevant for the conference. Same thing with Arizona at TCU. Iowa State at Utah. Utah looking to bounce back after Colorado drubbed them yesterday. Obviously, BYU, Colorado, and Arizona State should be cheering for Utah in that game. It doesn't really matter for BYU or Arizona State, but just for a little more security, that's probably the way you should cheer. UCF at West Virginia. It doesn't matter for the conference. West Virginia blew it yesterday against Baylor, and Dave Aranda probably coming back next year, it looks like. And so West Virginia no longer in it. And then BYU, Arizona State. I think that, obviously Arizona State wants to win that game. Iowa State needs BYU to drop their second game, and so they should both be cheering for Arizona State. BYU obviously wants to win. And then Colorado, to me, it doesn't really impact them because they need to win out either way. But BYU is probably their better matchup in the Big 12 championship game, so they should probably want the Cougars to win that game. And then Colorado at Kansas, everybody minus Colorado should probably be cheering for Kansas. At this point, and we talked about this a little bit last week, I think that the Big 12 championship game at this point is a playoff game. It is a playoff game because the loser is not going to make it to the playoff, right? The college football playoff. I think with BYU's loss yesterday, as good as they've been this year with their win over SMU and everything else, I don't think BYU can get in at 11-2. I don't think they can lose to Colorado or whoever they might end up playing and get in the college football playoff. I think there are too many teams that are already kind of locked in based on their records. Now, chaos could happen. Chaos could happen to where they do get in with a loss. But the committee told us that they would not be penalizing teams for going to their conference championship games. I don't think that's the case. I do think they are going to penalize the Big 12 team and the ACC team that loses their conference championship game. And whether you think that's fair, whether you think that's not fair, I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm not telling you that that's right or wrong. I don't think it's right, but I'm telling you what I think the committee is going to do. At this point, the committee is going to put in a Big 12 champion, an ACC champion. I think they're going to put in Notre Dame. I think they're going to put in a group of 5 team. I think they're going to put in 4 Big 10 teams. That's Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana. And then there are 6 SEC teams remaining, right? There are 6 SEC teams that have 2 or less losses: Texas, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. What I think happens is 4 of those 6 teams get in, and the loser of the ACC championship and the loser of the Big 12 championship is left out. So with this thing wide open, the 2 teams that get to the Big 12 championship are your teams, that the only 2 that have a shot to make the playoff. And that's maybe not too surprising. That's not too shocking. But I'll tell you this, even if BYU had won last night and beaten Kansas, I don't believe that they were going to put a 12-1 BYU team in the playoff anyway. I don't think they'd put a conference championship losing team in over an SEC team with just 2 or less losses. That just doesn't seem like reality to me. I think they'd have dropped the Big 12 team to just right outside of it, maybe put them right at 12, so they don't drop them too far. But we put you at 12, and you would have made it if not for that group of 5 champion. That's what I'm telling you the committee was going to do. Now, all these teams, with the exception, again, of Iowa State, control their own destiny. And so there's still plenty left to play for. Nobody's season's over. Maybe this is what BYU needed to kind of be that wake-up call so that they can go out and win their next 3 games. Their last 2 games against Big 12 opponents, and then the conference championship against whether that's Colorado or whomever. But story of the weekend to me is Arizona State. Looking at the projections, the Big 12 projections for this season, Deion Sanders and Kenny Dillingham were voted as the worst 2 coaches in the Big 12. And right now their 2 teams are a combined 16-4. They are both 8-2, and they both control their own destiny. If Colorado wins their 2 games and Arizona State wins their 2 games, that will be the matchup in the Big 12 championship. They'd have the head-to-head with BYU. That's why Arizona State would get in. And then Colorado obviously would be 7-1 at that point in the conference, and they would get in as well. Who does that favor? Man, at this point, it's hard to pick against Colorado. But if Arizona State can beat Kansas State and then beat BYU and then beat Arizona in back-to-back-to-back weeks, you got to like their chances against Colorado. Now, I don't think they're a great matchup for Colorado. I think Colorado probably is the favorite there by more than 7 points, but last night you saw Arizona State go on the road and win in Manhattan, Kansas as a double-digit dog. And so don't count out the Sun Devils and Kenny Dillingham just yet. The Big 12 has a bit of a problem because, again, only the champion gets in, but the good news for really all 4 teams involved, they mostly control their own destiny. Again, Iowa State needs a little bit of help. They need some chaos in front of them. They need to win their games for sure. But I do think that, at least 3 of the 4 teams control their destiny. Iowa State wouldn't be too outrageous to think that they could get back in the mix as well. if enough teams in front of them drop. You need BYU to give you some help. You need Colorado to give you some help. This Kansas team that Colorado plays this weekend, not the easy win I think we thought it would be several weeks ago for Colorado. This Kansas team has shown up and played really well lately. You got to go on the road to play it. You're not playing there in Boulder. Colorado has to take this very, very seriously. Obviously, I like Colorado's offense, but Kansas' defense has been playing really, really well lately, and getting a big win against BYU will give them the confidence they need to continue to push forward. And I think Colorado is in for a really good game this weekend. I'd lean Colorado at this point. We'll preview it at some point later in the week, so make sure you're subscribed and don't miss it. Listen, this is going to be a fun last 2 weeks in the Big 12, one of the better conference races that we've got, and we've got some fun ones. The Big 10 one is fun with Indiana and Ohio State playing. The SEC one is a jumbled mess of fun, but this one's really fun too. And if you're not watching the Big 12, if you're not watching these games happen, they are a ton of fun, and you need to start doing that. All of them are really fun. I don't think are there any late games next week. I think the Big 12 stuff is wrapped up a little bit earlier next week. I know there's a couple that are later, but I think a lot of the playoff type stuff is going to be wrapped up earlier. The Colorado-Kansas game is 3:30, I believe, which should be a lot of fun. So make sure you're tuned in here to College Football Addiction as we continue to break it down, as we continue to tell you what's happening and who's going to the playoff. Big day for Colorado, a big day for Arizona State. Not a great day for BYU. Iowa State did what they needed to do to stay alive, but a big day for Colorado and Arizona State. At this point, and it's hard to pick against Arizona State. They may upset BYU this weekend and find their way into the Big 12 championship. We'll break all of that down. We'll cover all of it here on College Football Addiction this week. So make sure you're locked in and don't miss any of it.